etiquette was very strictly controlled by each of the Tudor monarchs because the court was their public face. And so on the one hand, it had to be magnificent because the more magnificent, the more wealthy and therefore the more powerful. It's not just expense for the sake of expense. You know, they are showing off their wealth because wealth equals power. But it has to be strictly controlled. No monarch wants to be known for presiding over an immoral court. And it's really interesting that in the reign of Elizabeth, her court was described by a contemporary as being at once gay, decent, and superb. And that's the combination you wanted. It had to be full of sort of frivolity and entertainment, and it had to be superb. It had to be glittering, dazzling, to impress the world. But that word decent, I think, is the most important. The monarch was the moral heart of the nation and the moral heart of their court. So they had to both introduce and uphold very high standards. Now, some of my favourite rules include table manners. So because, you know, they spent a lot of time eating, so that was the subject of a whole raft of rules and regulations. And in fact, the Dutch writer, philosopher, humanist Erasmus published a book in the reign of Henry VIII with a list of such instructions, among them sit not down until you have washed, and there would be somebody whose responsibility was to help the king wash his hands before every meal, and indeed the queen. But then my favourite, Erasmus goes on to say, don't shift your buttocks, sit neatly and still for the duration of the feast. So you must have been kind of a bit on edge because everybody's watching you. And as if to remind you of that fact, at Hampton Court, where I'm lucky enough to work, one of my favourite features in the Great Hall, which was like the staff canteen. This is where most courtiers ate, in the Great Hall. You see in the ceiling these little faces peering down at you, and they're in the eaves, and they're called eavesdroppers, and that's where the name comes from, because they were put there to remind everybody dining below, you're being watched here. So don't put a foot, or indeed don't put a buttock wrong.